Okay, so we've touched on coffee, and the other two topics that people are going to want to ask about are chocolate and wine. What about the genetics of those?
Well, I can tell you there is no gene that has been identified that tells you that chocolate is bad for you or that you don't like
Thank
it.
you.
So that,
Thank you.
that doesn't exist. So let's just take that one off. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, chocolate, certainly dark chocolate, has um, been shown to have all kinds of beneficial health effects. But like anything, it's probably more beneficial for some people than others. There haven't been any studies, to my knowledge, showing that dark chocolate has, kind of adverse effects in some people. But depending on the type of chocolate, right? If it's milk chocolate and you're, consuming a big portion, right? You're getting quite a bit of sugar, quite a bit of saturated fat, and you have to balance that with the rest of your diet. Um, Alcohol is an interesting one because there have been studies showing that the equivalent, so kind of like a slow metabolizer of alcohol, they actually benefit from moderate consumption in terms of heart health. And that makes total sense, right? Because we know that, a glass of wine a day has been linked to a lower risk of heart disease in populations all over the world. But it turns out in those individuals who don't break down alcohol too quickly, so they benefit from the heart healthy effects, the cardioprotective effects of alcohol. Whereas those who are fast metabolizers of alcohol, they get rid of it pretty quickly, so they get less of a benefit. But it doesn't seem to be linked to harm, at least when it comes to heart disease. Now, with cancer, it's a different story. Alcohol, at least for breast cancer, seems to have the opposite effect. So again, a person needs to really weigh the benefits of risk for one disease versus another.
And is this the alcohol sensitivity marker, or is it a different marker?
Yeah, so this is actually, so there's a couple of different ways of establishing alcohol sensitivity. So it's, as you know, some people and certain ethnic groups, it's much more common where they get this kind of flushing of the skin. And that's because they're unable to metabolize acetaldehyde. So that's a metabolite of alcohol that causes you to have basically, symptoms of a hangover. Right. And so those individuals, they don't even benefit from the pleasant effects of alcohol. They just pretty much get the hangover side effects. And for them, they basically just avoid consuming alcohol. But there's another gene that affects just the metabolism of alcohol itself and how much of it circulates in the blood and has cardioprotective effects.
Very cool. Regarding chocolate, I have convinced myself based upon my genetics that I should be consuming dark chocolate. I do not have, so something we haven't dove into that the report looks at as well is how our genes actually influence our food choices. Yeah. So I don't have the genetic sweet tooth, so I don't feel like I'm at risk of overeating chocolate. But I do have some elevated risk in terms of my antioxidant capacity and needing some more antioxidants. So I go for the dark chocolate, not super high in sugar, potentially lots of antioxidants, and I convince myself that I'm doing myself a benefit.
Yeah, I think I definitely have the overeating gene, or the danger of the overeating gene.
The sweets?
Yeah, the sweets, the sugar preference. I forgot what it's called. Is that the sugar preference? Is that that's the GLUT2? Is that what that is?
Yes, yeah.
I think I'm extremely high on that allele.
You don't have the sugar gene, but you do have you're more prone to having a higher appetite. So you might just like to eat a little bit more, and sugar might be your go-to, because I think there's also that learned response, right? Like the nature versus nurture part 2, where so my mom's done this report as well. Mm-hmm. I don't have that sweet tooth, but my mom does. So we grew up eating lots of sweets because she always wanted to eat sweets. Yeah. So I think I have that like learned response to want more sweets.
So how much of a benefit? I mean, this is like an age-old
Yeah.
question and an age-old debate, but is it a 50-50 kind of benefit of each, where you start to talk about the effects of what we grow up with and what our environment kind of dictates versus what the personal genetics of what our bodies are metabolizing and require are?
I think it's a very valid question, Ahmed. I don't know if you have a response to that. I can't come up with, and I think it probably depends on each gene and sort of the penetrance of each gene, and then also how strong your upbringing was. But I don't know. Do you have a better response than that, Ahmed?
Yeah, no, that sounds certainly plausible. I mean, it's really tough. I don't think we've actually been able to completely elucidate the contribution of environment and genetics for a whole host of traits. We've tried to take a kind of an individual, and it might differ, right, with sugar as it would with alcohol, or as it would with caffeine.